Well, as countries across the globe battle to fight coronavirus, tensions between India and Pakistan seem to be on the boil again. In a latest incident, two staffers of the Indian High Commission in Islamabad seem to have gone missing in something that is definitely likely to trigger a diplomatic row. What has happened, why has it happened, is what we're going to find out in this episode of Government Matters. I have with me Snehesh Alex Philip, who will bring you all the details. Do send in your questions. As I said, this is a live episode and we'll be happy to answer them as we go along. Snehesh, so just run us through what has happened today or yesterday.
Well, it happened today early morning. Two officials of the Indian High Commission in Islamabad, both are drivers, had left in the car. They hadn't reached the destination despite 2 hours since leaving the High Commission. Following which, of course, the issue was taken up with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Pakistan.
Right.
And the MEA here was also informed of the same. So as of now, we have two officials who are and I mean by officials, I mean they are CISF drivers on reputation with the Indian High Commission in Islamabad, and they have gone missing.
Right. So, is it a tit for tat move? It's, as you've also written in your story today, I mean, I know a lot of it is speculation. We don't know what's happened. We don't know why it has happened. But just run us through the background of this and why you think it could be a tit for tat move.
Well, this is likely, as you rightly mentioned, this is likely to be a tit for tat exercise. Remember that it was late last month when the Indian security agencies, which is primarily the you have the IB, you have the MI, as well as you have the Delhi police, who were involved in an operation in which 3 Pakistani High Commission staffers in Delhi were detained.
Right.
2 of them have since been expelled. They have gone back to Pakistan along with their family. One driver, the driver was driving them around, is currently here in the country. But the moment it happened, everybody was expecting a tit for tat policy. We were expecting that Pakistan would also carry out some kind of an arrest or detention of Indian officials in Islamabad, and this is exactly what has happened. There are a lot of theories doing the rounds. For example, one of the things is that they could have been kidnapped by somebody else. Any person who's been to Pakistan. I've actually lived for about 9 months in Pakistan.
Right.
In Pakistan, every single Indian embassy staffer, I was a journalist there. Despite that, I was being trailed continuously.
Right.
Every single staffer is trailed by Pakistani security agencies. It all depends on whether on the rank the official holds. So basically, if you are somebody higher up, there are ISI which is involved. There are multiple agencies there. Military intelligence is involved. The Pakistan Islamabad Police Special Branch is involved. Then you have the IB. Then you have the ISI. Then you have the military intelligence which is involved. So every single staffer is trailed by the Pakistan agencies. And if you remember, Ruhi, earlier this month, there were reports, and India had objected strongly to this, about Indian staff in Pakistan being intimidated by these security guys who keep a very close proximity to the officials.
Right. So, Snehesh, now what are the options in front of India if these two staffers remain untraceable? What is it that India can or should or will do next?
Well, I don't think so that these staffers are going to remain untraceable. The officials of the record have very well maintained that they suspect that the 2 staffers were picked up by the ISI, which is the intelligence agency of Pakistan. It is expected that in the next few hours, there would be a report which will come out from Pakistan identifying them most probably as spies, and they would eventually be expelled. Between India and Pakistan, it's always tit for tat.
Right.
Whatever happens to any official of the Pakistan embassy here happens to this. It's same
exactly
happens.
The same happens there. Right?
Exactly same happens in Islam. This is an old thing that has happened. So whenever in the past India has expelled staff, Pakistani embassy staff for activities beyond the scope that they were brought in for, the Pakistanis have also retaliated doing the same, and it works both ways.
Right. Snehesh, can you tell us something about what's happening at the LOC? Are there ceasefire violations happening? There is an increase in ceasefire violations.
Well, the ceasefire violations have been happening on a regular basis. If I don't know if you've, it's happening on an everyday basis. It was only yesterday that we lost another soldier of the Indian Army in ceasefire violations. The civilian homes have also been targeted by Pakistani forces. Now you'll have to understand that this is the time of the infiltration. So all these ceasefire violations, take place to aid and abet the infiltration, attempts of the terrorist. And hence, we had earlier done this story on the print in which he had mentioned about how the army has put in their summertime strategy along the LOC.
Right.
And what we've been told is that there have been additional men and equipment that have been put into, have been deployed along the LOC to ensure that the infiltration can be checked to a maximum extent possible.
Right.
However, the infiltration still happens. That is why you have these foreign terrorists who are in Kashmir because the infiltration has been successful, even though the army would say that the infiltration is down, or nobody would really want to accept that infiltration is there. But there is reports from other security agencies in India which say that the infiltration have happened, and the mere fact that you have foreign terrorists killed in encounters, or you have foreign terrorists operating in Kashmir, is the fact that eventually they did infiltrate and come in. So the infiltration season, the ceasefire violation is pretty normal in this.
It's routine.
It's a sad thing that it has become so routine.
Right.
The ceasefire violations.
Right. So Snehesh, we have a bunch of audience questions. The first question is from Ramesh. How much should India worry as there are border disputes emerging from all of its neighbors now? China, of course, we know what's happening at the LAC. Nepal is just about to amend its map, which includes disputed territory. So how much does India need to worry? It's just surrounded by unfriendly neighbors on all sides now.
Well, I think the main neighbor that one should really worry about is China. Whatever that, the army chief has gone on record earlier to say that, he suspects a third hand behind what Nepal has done in terms of the border dispute. And everybody knows that what he meant was China. Yes, it's a fact that there are tensions between India and China. And I strongly believe that as long as this border dispute continues to remain, without the undefined border remains, the tensions will always be there. It will right now the talks are on between both the sides to resolve the situation that is happening at the LAC, particularly in eastern Ladakh. The talks would eventually, it is hoped that the talk would eventually lead to the resolution. Of course, in the past we've discussed, various complexities of the talks. Do watch, the earlier government matters episode.
Government matters, right?
But but eventually it is going to get resolved. But this is not something that is going to go away. It will keep coming back. So yes, there are issues that are there. Pakistan has always been a problematic area. Nepal has seen the ups and downs, so it's
but this is, I think, one of the most bitter points with Nepal as far as India is concerned.
Well, yes, as far as India is concerned, this has this particular the government that is there in Nepal. You of course know Ruhi on the points that it came to power. So this is with Nepal. Yes, it needs a kind of a sensitive handling. There is no doubt about it. But I would still say China is the bigger,
worry right now.
Worry right now.
Right. Abhijit, what is your reading of the diplomats' problem? Is it Pakistan getting desperate for quid pro quo? Is it messaging of Pak army curtailing civilian leadership by snubbing Imran Khan?
Well, there is no, as I earlier mentioned, this cannot be seen in context of whether the army is snubbing Imran Khan or not. There's no reason why the army should snub Imran Khan. The Pakistan army is very well in par in Pakistan.
For all practical purposes.
For all practical purposes. Remember that Imran Khan came to power, riding on the shoulders of the Pakistani military. So it is very wrong when people, say that, that the Pakistan army is trying to wrest power from the civilian government or is showing its place and all. But as far as, yes, and I've mentioned this is likely to be a tit for tat case in which India had gone ahead and detained two two of its officials, of Pakistani High Commission officials, and expelled them. And it was something that the Indians were also expecting. The staff and all were told to be doubly alert about people approaching them over things like that, on safety issues and all. And this was something that was expected. So there's most likely to be a tit for tat issue, a move. At least that is the hope.
Right. Saurabh says, please elaborate on the two Indian High Commission officers who went missing. Is this a new way to harass Indian diplomats in Pakistan? So I think, you've taken quite a large bit of the question earlier, but let me just ask, where do you see this going? Do you think there will be now a retaliation from India? Is this now setting off a diplomatic row which will turn into a vicious cycle?
Well, this is like this particular incident. Eventually, if it is found that it's just a tit for tat scenario, then it's like a storm in the teacup. This happens between India and Pakistan on a regular basis.
Right.
It has been happening over the years. You've had instances where, and that is how sadly the diplomatic relations is between the two countries. So I don't see it going beyond beyond what is already out there. Remember that India and Pakistan currently have the lowest level of diplomatic relations. You don't have high commissioners posted at each other's locations.
After Kashmir, the abrogation of...
After the last year's August 5 move. So the relations are already down. So it's not going to go any further down. And as I said, if it is eventually, it does come out that it's a tit for tat, I would say this is just a storm in the teacup.
Well, let's hope it's that. Is India ready to fight a two-front war as China, Pakistan, and now Nepal joining the enemy fleet? This is from Kamal.
Well, see, militarily, Nepal is not involved. We're not taking into account Nepal in terms of war. But when you're talking about two-front war, I think that is what the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy, brings into picture when it strategizes, when it plays out the war games and all. But if you're asking me whether India can take on China and Pakistan at the same time, well, all the three forces would say so. I would also believe that it's capable. But the fact is that there are a lot of there are a lot of things that India has, but there's a lot of capability that needs to be developed to fight a full-fledged two-front war.
Right.
So there's a difference between
skirmishes
at the border and a full-fledged war.
Right.
I think India has to while again, it's all hypothetical things, so I would not really want to speculate on whether what would happen. But the three forces take into account a two-front war scenario whenever they strategize and plan for things.
Right. Is it fair to say that it's a diplomatic disaster for India? I think
which one?
What has happened right now, the two officers missing, but I think it would be a stretch to say that at this point.
Well, the two officers missing in is not a diplomatic, what was the word that he used? Diplomatic?
Debacle, disaster, whatever.
Diplomatic disaster. But if you're asking, but I presume that you're asking whether this is what's happening with China, Nepal, and Pakistan together. Well, I would have to really think about using the word completely a blunder.
But
it's a huge diplomatic challenge as of now.
It is a huge diplomatic setback because neighborhood
There is no doubt about the fact that it's a huge setback, especially what is happening with Nepal.
Yeah, so that's, this Modi government has talked about neighborhood first, and now it just doesn't seem that it is neighborhood first anymore. You have a problem with Nepal. You of course have tensions at the LAC. Pakistan is always it's always a tumultuous relationship, and even with Bangladesh, because of the entire NRCCA issue, there have been certain creases. So is this India's lowest point as far as its neighbors are concerned?
Well, there is no doubt about it that it is one of the lowest point as far as India's neighborhood is concerned. And I said here also, the main player that India should focus on and should is China in this case. Be it, it is believed that whatever Nepal is doing, I'm sure they have genuine grievances, might be there on a lot of other issues. But this whole issue has come to light. It's primarily felt in the Indian establishment that China has a big role in this.
Right, because the Oli dispensation is known to be close to China.
Exactly.
So Snehesh, just before we wrap up, tell us what is happening at the LAC now. What is the latest on that front?
Well, the latest on that front, as we've reported in the print earlier, is the fact that there are multiple rounds of talks that have been held at both at the military as well as diplomatic level. As we sit here and speak to our audience, you have the brigade as well as the commanding officer of the battalion level talks, which is happening at Petrol Point 14 and Petrol Point 17 in eastern Ladakh. The talks are on. There's a bit of a bit of disengagement, small disengagement steps that have been taken in the Galwan and the Hot Spring area as part of the confidence building measures. But as we've reported earlier too, that the big worry is what is happening in Pangong Lake. The Chinese are sitting at Finger 4 area of the Pangong Lake, and this is something which is a worry because it stops the Indian patrol team from moving ahead, to the LAC, which is at Finger 8.
Right. Well, just as tensions continue at the LAC, a fresh round of diplomatic rows seems to have erupted between India and Pakistan. As Snehesh pointed out, India is battling on multiple fronts so far at this point in the neighborhood, while also, of course, having to deal with a crisis like coronavirus. Snehesh, thank you so much for talking to us. Thank you for watching Government Matters and for sending in your questions.